So admittedly, over the last, I don't know, say year and a half, maybe two, instead of focusing on the newest and hottest games that everybody's been playing, I've turned most of my attention to my personal collection, playing a variety of games across a variety of different consoles that I've never played before. And within that realm, something that I've enjoyed doing quite immensely is running through entire series from the first game all the way to the last game, or in most cases, at least where they currently sit as of this video. And while I've been having fun doing that, in the back of my head I've been also trying to figure out the best way that I could deliver those experiences to you and share them as some sort of content for the channel. Now, my original plan of attack for this was going to be just reviews. Essentially, a review for each individual installment of the series and run through it that way. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that some of these series have a lot of games to them and can be quite lengthy. And all of a sudden, the idea of making a video for every game individually was quite time consuming, and if I'm completely honest, unnecessary work. Not only that, but sometimes the gap of time in which it takes for me to play games can be quite lengthy in of itself, and with my memory not probably being as good as it should be, I would be afraid that I wouldn't remember a certain detail or something specific about the game that I would want to include in a review. So essentially the idea of doing an in-depth review like I normally do for each game went out the window. Instead, I got the idea, like, why don't we tackle these things like a countdown, essentially. Write down each game from your least favorite to your absolute favorite and rank them countdown style, which is exactly what we're going to do. I've got my list, and I thought the best place to start would be none other than the Resident Evil series, which actually I just recently completed with my mom, so that was kind of cool. Now, just two little, I don't know if you want to call them disclaimers or bullet points or whatever, before we get into the list itself. The first being that I am not going to spend too much time discussing plot of each game. I'm gonna just kind of skim over twists and turns and other narrative devices. I am going to essentially be speaking to you as though you have experienced these games for yourself and know exactly what it is that I'm talking about. So we can just whip through these games super quick. If you are not somebody that has played these games for yourself, I suggest you do so. Primarily because I don't want the thoughts, feelings, and opinions expressed in this video to affect you playing them and experiencing them. Ultimately, I don't want them to deter you from playing them yourself. So, go out there and experience these games for yourself. Form your own thoughts and opinions, and then come back and we'll have a discussion about it. Maybe you'll agree with me on some things. Maybe you won't. I don't know. You won't know until you do it yourself. The second thing is pertaining to how the lists are set up themselves. Essentially, all I did in regards to Resident Evil was Googled Resident Evil in chronological order and played the games the way that it told me. I am aware that Resident Evil has quite a few spin-offs and some alternate timeline stuff that they did. That is not going to be touched in this video. This video is purely about the original chronological timeline from Resident Evil 1 to Resident Evil 7 and everything in between. Now, as far as those games go, I would love to play them. I hope to get to play them soon, and then maybe I'll make reviews or some other piece of content for those games. So if those games happen to be one of your favorites and it's not in this list, that's why. So, I guess without further ado, let's crack open the list here and start with what I guess would be technically my least favorite Resident Evil, Code Veronica. Now, I know just by saying that, I've already pissed some of you off. But before you really get mad and start screaming at me, let me just explain that Code Veronica being where it is on this list has nothing to do with the game itself. It has everything to do with me, myself, and I personally. I was really excited to play this game. I tracked this game down and bought it so that I could play it firsthand. The only thing is no matter how hard I tried, and believe me, I did try, I couldn't get past the tanky controls. Code Veronica was actually my first experience with those original tanky controls. Because when I played the original 3, they were all the remakes and remasters that didn't have those control schemes. And they ran really, really nicely, really smooth, and kind of eliminated that issue. So Code Veronica was my very first time dealing with those original control schemes. And I just couldn't do it. I know I'm a wimp, I know I'm a pansy, whatever, but I just couldn't do it. And I tried and tried and tried until my mom actually pointed out that if I had trouble walking a straight freaking line, then what was I going to do when faced with a decent sized group of zombies or during a boss fight or anything like that? To which I conceded her point, and we moved on to Resident Evil 4, I think, comes after Code Veronica, if I'm not mistaken. But essentially what I did was I looked up a walkthrough of the game just to make sure that we weren't missing any huge story elements, so that I could piece things together and kind of update my mom on where we are and where we're headed and stuff like that. And that was how I got to experience Code Veronica. As far as the story, it was actually pretty good. I actually appreciated it a lot. Specifically, how it shined a light on the Ashford side of things. Games up to this point really only focused on Dr. Marcus and Dr. Spencer. But this is where the Ashford family gets their 15 minutes of fame. It's all about them and kind of the wacky things that they were doing, and they were certainly up to some stuff, let me tell you. As most people in Resident Evil are, and most people associated with Umbrella are. So I thought that was really cool. So it really has nothing to do with the story, the characters, the game overall. I just figured because it's the only game in the Resident Evil series that I wasn't able to play myself and experience firsthand, it probably wasn't very fair to put it any higher than it is. And that is the only reason why it's in last place. But moving away from that, we have the original Resident Evil. Same thing. Nothing was wrong with the story. Nothing was wrong with the characters. I actually thought it was super cool to finally, at the ripe old age of almost 27, finally be able to experience the original Resident Evil mansion incident. And kind of finally understand what everybody's talking about. The game, the events that started it all. That was pretty cool. I think what pretty much soured our experience on this game was navigating. The mansion is very, very big, and it is very, very easy to get lost. Considering that the game doesn't really walk you through, like, first you go here, then you go here, then you put this there, then you blah, blah, blah. It doesn't function like that. It says, here's this giant-ass mansion with like 150,000 rooms. Figure it out. See you at the end of the game. That's pretty much how it goes. And because my mom and I were pretty much focused on plot, we didn't really want to spend too much time wandering around aimlessly trying to figure out, you know, where we were supposed to go next, and you know, going back and forth and yada yada yada. So we used a walkthrough. The only thing is that even with a walkthrough, we still ended up doing exactly what we didn't want to do in the first place, which was wander around aimlessly for hours and hours and hours and hours, looking for things that we couldn't find. The best walkthrough that my mom could find was very, very poorly written. I'm not sure if maybe the person spoke in like broken English, or maybe they were drunk at the time that they wrote it. You know, maybe they sit at their computer desk with a beer and write these things out and post them to the internet. I don't know. But it was very, very poorly written and very, very confusing to follow. One of our favorite instances of this is kind of a running joke between us now that we still whip out from time to time. The walkthrough that this young man or young lady wrote said to look for something called a lamp shelf. So, you know, we were like, okay, well, what the heck's a lamp shelf? Probably a shelf like mid to high up on a wall with a lamp on it that's going to have an item. And we went to where the walkthrough told us to go to search for this item and could not find a shelf with a lamp on it. After about maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours of just wandering the halls trying to figure it out, we found it on a side table in a hallway with a lamp on it. So it wasn't a lamp shelf at all, it was a table with a lamp on it, like an end table. Now, I know that part of that aggravation is because we were pretty much blind and couldn't see the item sitting right in front of us on this table, but it did blend in, and you know what being overly aggravated and frustrated does to you. But we did finally find it, and we did we did navigate the game okay. But by the time we got there, by the time we reached the end, we were ready to be done with the game and move on. So yeah, I think the game was fine. It was, the parts that were fun, but it's just moving around this giant map with really no direction, and the walkthrough was essentially the blind leading the blind. It felt like the majority of the time, the way it was written, and it just kind of soured the experience. It spoiled it for us, and I can't really say that we have any ambition to go back to the mansion anytime soon. So we'll move on away from it and talk about Resident Evil 5. Resident Evil 5. So I think anybody that has played Resident Evil 5 knows exactly what I'm about to say and what I'm about to admit that I hate about this game. Is it the plot? No. Is it the characters? Not really. It is the partner that you are paired up with. It's not so much the co-op aspect of the game that bothers me. I'm pretty sure the way that it is intended to play is with you and a buddy going through it together. And that is exactly how I would recommend you play this game if you haven't. Because if you're like me, who has no friends, and you have to deal with the Sheva AI as a partner, it is going to be an absolute nightmare. Now, you would think that in a game like Resident Evil, when they force you to have a partner the way that 5 does, in a game like Resident Evil, in a game like Resident Evil 5, you would think that you would at least be able to tell that AI partner what to do. That you would have some sort of tactical commands that you could give her, like, hey, go over here, shoot at this target, stay over here, like, cover me, run away, whatever the case is. Some sort of chain of command that you could give her that she would follow. Except that for whatever reason, the AI of Sheva has none of that. There is absolutely 100%, and I know because I checked, there is no way to control Sheva whatsoever. And what makes it a nightmare when you can't control your partner that you're forced to have is that there are specific points in the game where you need to cooperate to move on. Specifically, there is one enemy in the game where you have to shoot a very specific weak point, as is common with the Resident Evil series, to kill it. Now, the thing about this enemy is that if it gets too close to you, it will insta-kill you. There is no stabbing it in the neck with a knife to save yourself, no secondary weapon nonsense. Basically, if it gets close enough to you, if it gets you, you're instantly dead. You're done. That's it. So ideally, what you would want to do, is tell Sheva to draw its attention with her gun, stay far, far away from you so you can back up, create some distance, and take your shots. Everybody, lives, everybody gets to go home happy. But because that's not how Sheva works, what happens instead is you try and create that space for you to take your shots, and Sheva is rubber banded to you, which means that you create that distance, she closes the gap by standing right next to you and leading those insta-kill enemies right to you constantly. You are under threat of danger pretty much not because of the game, not because of your own skill level, but because Sheva leads them straight to you and jams them right down your throat the entire freaking time. Oh, and if that's not bad enough, there are bosses that require you to cooperate with each other. I am recalling a particular boss that requires one of you to wrestle around with him, exposing his weak point, and the other one is supposed to shoot said weak point and, do away with the boss. Now, because I am not the best shot under pressure, I figured it'd be easier for me to be the one that wrestles with him, exposes his weak point, and I'll let the computer, who you wouldn't think would miss, to take the shot and end the fight. Except Sheva didn't take the shot. I had to replay the boss like 5 or 6 times because she just wouldn't do what me or the game itself wanted her to do. And, that's pretty much how the entire game with the AI Sheva feels. You feel like you're completely at the mercy of this AI that you have zero control over. And it's just like, it's not fair. It's definitely not player friendly. And oh my god, this is probably the Resident Evil that I got the most mad at, just because I was put in so many ridiculous situations because of Sheva and her stupidly programmed AI. So yeah, if you're going to play this game, I don't care what you got to do to get a friend. You can make one, call one, write one, whatever you got to do. Play with a friend. Play with somebody that's more competent than the computer, because that's probably why I'm starting to go bald, is because I tore my hair out because of Sheva. Moving on, we have Resident Evil 0. Now, I know that the majority of the diehards in the Resident Evil community don't really like 0 because of how it had to rewrite the events of the first game in order to fit in as a prequel. I liked pretty much everything that the plot of this game did. I liked how it deep dove into kind of the origin of Umbrella itself, how it deep dove into the origin of the T-virus and kind of showed off this rivalry between Dr. Marcus and Dr. Spencer, and kind of everything leading up to the events of the original mansion incident. I really, really liked that and really, really appreciated that. What I consider a thumbs down for Resident Evil Zero is the main character that you play as, Rebecca Chambers. We'll call her Becky. The thing about Becky is that she's not a good character. She's definitely not a good protagonist, which is crappy because the game wants you to care about her. That part's obvious because you're stuck with her from the very beginning. This is like the first character that you're introduced to and have to deal with the entire game. And she's just not enough. Now, I know when it comes to the Resident Evil series, while it's got great characters on both the good and bad guy side of the coin. I know that some of them can be corny. It's filled with melodramatic moments and super bizarre things. I know that. And at times that's what makes these characters so great, is that some of them just have really, really big personalities and they do crazy things. But when you stack her up against, say, a Claire or a Jill, all you're gonna see is a rookie cop, a bland, generic rookie cop that looks like she's 12. And not only is she, annoying in terms of gameplay, like she can't take any damage whatsoever. Like zombies wink at her and she dies. Like she's definitely not the tank that her partner Billy Cohen, I believe is his name, is. So she's not any fun to play. She's not any fun to listen to. She just literally offers nothing to the game and is just really a small, insignificant part of the Resident Evil universe, in my opinion. And any time that I got the opportunity, I chose to play Billy over her, just because Billy was so much better. Which might not be saying a whole lot, but in my opinion, Billy was better. But, if maybe there's somebody out there that feels very different than I do. Maybe somebody thinks that Rebecca Chambers, Becky, is the greatest protagonist in the games. Maybe better than Jill, maybe better than Chris, and if that's so, I want to talk to you because I want to know exactly what makes her that way, if that's what you believe. I don't know. But I think that would be one of my only dark spots of the game. Next we have Resident Evil Revelations 2. Now, this game is just middle of the road for me. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing great about it, in my opinion. The plot is okay. It's like, so this group of people is on an island. They each have a wristband. The wristband changes colors dependent on their fear level. I assume it's like their blood pressure or something. And if it goes to red, you are injected with the virus of the game and transformed into a hideous monster, just like is typical with the Resident Evil series. Okay, cool. They basically turned it into a Saw movie or something. Like I said, I didn't hate it. It wasn't bad. It was just, there just wasn't anything there. I wasn't enthralled with it. I wasn't driven by it. I wasn't um, consumed by it the way that Revelations 1 did, which we will talk about here um, as the list goes on. Pretty much the only like wow, big exciting thing was finding out that that Wesker has a sister, and that she is the main bad guy of the game. Like, okay, that's a surprising twist. I like that, and I think that's the game that introduces the idea that Wesker was actually part of a project, and he has, or at least had, multiple siblings, to which I believe him and the sister from this game are the only two that survived. As far as I remember, correct me somebody if I'm wrong, but I think that's how it goes. And that for me is really the only takeaway from this game. I think there's a lot less enjoyable ones, definitely, and there's definitely better ones. It's just middle of the road for me, and I enjoyed Revelations 1 as you'll come to see. I don't really know why, but I did. So there it is. And the last one for this video, because I found out last time I tried recording this that not the entire list will fit in one video file, is Resident Evil 3, the remake. So I guess my long and skinny of my opinion of Resident Evil 3 is literally everything that makes the Resident Evil 2 remake good makes 3 good. It looks damn good. It feels damn good. The tension is really, really good. Having to deal with Nemesis over Tyrant is a completely different ball game, because there was a way to deal with Tyrant, where you could like stun him and then you'd run away and he'd F off for a little while. Nemesis does not operate that way. You can stun him and run away, but he's not going to F off for long. Pretty much as soon as he's introduced, you are hunted. Jill is hunted, and you feel it. Every step that you take, you constantly are worried that Nemesis is right behind you. And that tension is great. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, doing things, and thinking to myself, boy, do I hope that Nemesis doesn't show up right now. Because boy, it would be great if he did, with all the sarcasm in the world. And wouldn't you know it, right when I always said that every time is when that he would show his lovely mug and just make an already not great situation all the more complicated, because now you're dealing with the things that you have to deal with, zombies, whatever the case is, and you have to deal with Tyrant now on top of it. and it's really good. It's really great, actually. The only bad things that I would say about it really are, one, it's short, which isn't a damning thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a bummer. It felt like right when we were getting into it, right when we got our mojo, um, and things were clicking on all cylinders for us, the game was over. And we were just like, my mom and I looked at each other and we were like, oh, I guess that's it. Time to move on to the next one. Like you blink and you're on the last boss and the credits are rolling. Um, so yeah, I mean that was kind of disappointing. That was kind of a bummer. The one other thing that I would have to put in the negative column for me is a little bit more serious than the game's length. There is a particular point in the game where we got to. I think it was specifically the part where you play Carlos and you're having to defend Jill in the hospital, for those of you that know what I'm talking about. I got to the point where I was able to do it a few times, and I died, and it brought me to the continue or the load game screen, whatever it is, and it froze. And I'm talking like hard froze, like the controller wouldn't move at all, nothing. I had zero control over the situation, which in of itself is rare for me. I am one of the rare people, the fortunate people, I think, in this generation with the PS4 and Xbox One that don't experience too many issues like that with my games. It's definitely not common enough for me to think it's normal. So when this happened, I was like, huh, that's interesting. So I was like, oh, we'll just, close out of the game, reopen it. We'll just, load the game and hopefully pick up right where we left off. So I did that, and it gave me the nice startup screen with the beautiful picture of Nemesis, the way that it does, and I got a really strange error that said that it didn't recognize the game, that the game wasn't installed, that I didn't own the game, something to that effect. There was some issue with the disc, which was even stranger than it freezing. So we gave that a whirl a handful of times, same error every time. I was like, oh, so about the only thing that I could think to do is just, as unfortunate as it would be, is to uninstall the game, reinstall it, and start it up fresh, and we'll just resync the game data and go from there. Except that didn't work. I still got the same error, and basically when the game froze, it like bricked itself from my mom's Xbox, like completely. And of course, I'm at this point frantically going through the internet to see if this is a huge problem or if anybody else knows anything about this. And apparently at the time, a lot of people were experiencing different things. Apparently that portion of the game, you get to a specific spot in the game, which happened to be the part with Carlos in the hospital, and it would do a whole myriad of glitches and bug. Essentially, that portion of the game is bugged and would do all sorts of things for people. It was a pretty big problem child. I'm assuming now that that has been fixed and patched. I assume, but if you are looking to get Resident Evil 3, maybe just keep that in the back of your head that if it's not fixed and not patched, you could possibly run into issues there. I know not everybody did, but yeah, we were able to beat the game. What ended up happening was I just had to bring my Xbox out, install it on my Xbox, pick up where we left off, and beat the game. But that was a pretty significant thing. I've never had a game do quite that to a system before, which kind of put a not so good taste in my mouth. My mom didn't really know what was going on, kind of thought the whole situation sucked, but I mean, it wasn't the end of the world. We got it rolling again. So that is Resident Evil 3, the remake, which leaves 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I believe. So in the next video, we will be kicking off, I guess, the top 5 Resident Evil games on my list. So until then, guys, thanks for watching. Leave comments, share your opinions. Let's discuss everything I talked about here, and we'll see you in the next video.